You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
I'm Michael G. Williams, award-winning novelist and North Carolina weird enthusiast. I am a weird enthusiast about North Carolina and an enthusiast about the weird in North Carolina. So this is the first in our special series called Arcane Carolinas Case Files, where what we'll do is talk to other folks who have experiences out in the field, sometimes literally out in the field. Where they're
a field.
A field. Yes, experience in the field and experience in a field, where they come on the show and tell us about their research experiences, their research groups, where they do their research in the Carolinas, and how to get in touch with them if you are interested in engaging them in looking into the weird, strange, or unexplained around you.
And sometimes they have their own podcasts or YouTube channels, so there's more stuff to check out.
Yeah.
This is about community building and connecting like-minded people. Our stories that we're going to share are their own. We make no claim to ownership of the stories that they share with us, and we are excited that they're willing to come on and talk.
We know that you're excited to hear stories from around the Carolinas, and the thing is, we make the show because we're excited to hear stories from around the Carolinas. There are a lot of folks out there with experiences that they're ready to share and expertise in investigating these things, and we want to make sure that they get to be in the spotlight too.
All right.
Cool. Thanks for joining us for this installment, I guess I'll call it, of Arcane Carolinas Case Files. Amber, introduce yourself and tell us about your show. Oh, well, let me give Charlie a chance to introduce himself too.
I'm here too. Don't edit that out. That was funny.
I'm going to keep that. Don't worry. I'll make myself look bad every now and then.
Yeah. I'm still here. My name's Charlie.
That was really creepy. You can edit that part out. Actually, just leave the whole thing. It's fine.
No, go ahead and introduce yourself, Charlie.
No, I just did.
Oh, okay. Then we're good. We've got our.
This will be
letting everyone know I'm here.
Right now. This will be part of. We'll have bumpers on the beginning and end. They know who I am. It's fine.
Okay, we've got our weird little Sam Hain from Trick or Treat intro there. Amber, introduce yourself and tell us about your show.
Well, my name is Amber. I am the president of the Beer City Ghost Hunters in Asheville, North Carolina. So we are a paranormal group strictly for fun. We are not professionals. We have some professional equipment, but we really don't know what we're doing. We just like to go have a good time. But I do also have a podcast of my own with my friend Vanessa, True CrimeBuzz. We basically drink alcoholic beverages and discuss random true crime cases and our opinions on it. And it's a blast to do, but paranormal is my first love. I wish I had a paranormal podcast.
Well, thank you for
joining one right now.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to be here. You have no idea.
Thank you for joining us. Your ghost hunting group, do you accept leads? Like if somebody says, hey, I got this situation, or they want to tell you about a particular local legend, do you want people to get in touch with you with that information?
We do, because we know all the hot spots in Asheville, at least. There's a lot of very popular spots, and we've been there a million times. So we do like to know about new places that we're not aware of, whether it be in states, we're willing to travel. We've been to multiple places. Our very first trip was the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum up in West Virginia, and that was a blast. We've been to Kentucky at the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and we've also been to Ohio for the Ohio State Reformatory. Now, these are all big places, but we do want to know about this old abandoned building off this road that I live near, super haunted. You guys should check it out. We would love to know about that, but we are not professionals. So I had a phone call the other day from a guy who said, God bless him, he sounded like he lived in BFE, and he was telling me about how he thinks his house is haunted and that his bed was shaking at night and he could hear screaming at night. And I said, well, can you email me some information? And he says, oh, darling, I don't know how to email. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
On the true crime side of me, I don't want to go somewhere I'm going to get murdered.
Yeah.
So anywhere
Yeah.
that my group and I can go and just have fun and investigate, we're willing to do. But we are not trying to help anyone. I'm not trying to look up demons, that's for sure.
You know what's funny is this is a new segment. We haven't actually released one yet, so people haven't heard. That comes up so frequently.
Yeah.
And when we started this podcast, Michael and I, hashed out our comfort levels with different topics, and that was my big red I don't want to deal with it button. That's cool. Well, how should people get in touch with you?
The last time we did anything was back in 2018, because in 2019 I bought a house and got married and got a dog. It was like the busiest year of my life. So I was like, I need a break. And then, of course, 2020 has just been the best year ever. So we can't go anywhere. But if anybody wants to get in touch with us, you can just email me directly. It's amberdoreen28@gmail.com.
Cool.
And you can just tell me some cool places. We're trying to get a YouTube and a website up. Now that things are starting to open back up, we want to travel some more. Mm-hmm. But I will give you that information as soon as I get it, so you can share it with people.
And just one more time, as an actual fan of your true crime podcast, do you have a Facebook page for that, or?
Yes.
That's a loaded question. I know that you do. Just tell people about your Facebook page.
So, True Crime Buzz, we are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We have a website, truecrimebuzz.com. We have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All those handles are TC Buzz Podcast. So you can find us everywhere. And we upload new episodes every Tuesday. And for the month of October, we are doing spooky true crime stories, which is my favorite. And we just did one on Haunted Asheville. And I think that's my favorite episode so far.
I cannot wait to go grocery shopping and listen to that episode.
Yes.
My podcast time is cutting the grass. That's my listen to podcast time. It's funny how people in the times that we're in these unprecedented times,
yeah.
Not everybody has a commute anymore. So it's like, when do I find time to listen to it? And I always chuckle when Michael mentions his grocery store time as his podcast.
I know.
I either listen to podcasts about the history of the Roman Empire, or I listen to True Crime Buzz. I love the happiest stories.
Only the happiest stories, yes.
Well, would you be willing to share a story with us about the Beer City Ghost Hunters?
Yeah. So for Christmas one year, my husband, I told him, so I used to be obsessed with Ghost Adventures. That was my show. Lately, it's kind of gotten a little out of hand, if you ask me personally, but I was obsessed. I was like, I want to be a ghost hunter. I want that to be my job. And my husband bought me ghost hunting equipment for Christmas one year, like a voice recorder, a spirit box, a millimeter, and I got so excited that I got my friends that were in it with me, and I said, we're making a group and we're making this official, and we're going to just go find all the ghosts. And they were like, absolutely. So that's kind of how we got started. And we did upload a YouTube video on, I think it's my personal page, so YouTube, Amber Doreen 28. Of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. That was the best footage that I think we've gotten. That's why I put it into a YouTube video as far as sounds, pictures. I didn't see any full body apparitions. That's my goal. I go looking for this stuff, and I think they know that. And so they're like, nope, this girl's not scared. We're just going to hang out behind the curtain and wait for the next group to come through. So as far as footage, that's the best thing I have. But story-wise, when our group went to the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky, I've never felt or seen anything. I've always had, where you kind of just get a sense where you feel a little creeped out or you get a little anxious. I've heard knocks. I've heard bangs. I've heard voices, but I've never actually seen or felt anything like a touch. Every time we go on an investigation, they laugh at me because I always have my arm out and I say, come touch me, or I try to feel for cold spots. I've never felt a cold spot. And so I'm like, I know ghosts are real. I just want to feel it. So when we went to the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, we went into this room where they used to store the bodies. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but basically it was I want to say tuberculosis hospital.
Oh.
Yes. And so they had what they called the death chute. It's a great name.
Wow.
But they would keep people there, and it's in this giant, beautiful building. It's very open, big windows, and they thought that the air would naturally heal people, like the mountain air. Very similar to Highland Hospital here in Asheville. They used to be a tuberculosis clinic for the same thing, just much smaller. But they obviously didn't know that that wasn't the case, and so a lot of people died. This was pre-vaccine. And they died so quickly that they had nowhere to store bodies. They only had one room with, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the metal doors where they can put the bodies into.
Yeah, the big refrigeration units.
Yeah. And they were dying so quickly that they had to literally put a room next to the death tunnel to store bodies on top of each other. It was that bad. And then as they could, they would pull this little levee system through the tunnel and pull them down so that they could secretly get rid of the bodies and not show people how bad it really was.
Yeah.
So in this room where they stored the bodies, the guide told us sometimes if you lay on the floor, you'll feel the pressure of possibly bodies on top of you. And yes, that face you're making, that is what the other girls in my group were doing. And they knew me. I was like, I'll be the first. Let me do it. So I went and laid down. And my sister-in-law at the time laid about maybe 3 feet away from me because she was like, I'll try it, but if I feel anything, we're out. And I was like, all right, whatever. So we're laying there, and Kim, who's also in the group, she's like, do you feel anything? And I was laying there just like, please, God, let me feel something. And I was like, no. And they're walking around, and they're like, all right, nothing's going on in here. Let's go to the next room. And I said, give me just like one more second. And I'm laying there, and out of nowhere, I literally felt someone, because my feet were kind of pointed up because I'm just laying flat on my back. Someone grabbed my right foot and pulled. And I looked over at my sister-in-law at the time and was like, was that you? And I realized she was far away from me. And then I looked at my other group members and I said, oh my God, my foot just got pulled. And they were like, let's go. And I said, no, this is amazing. Like, I almost cried tears of joy. I've never felt anything like that. I don't know if it was a ghost or it had to be, because there was nothing around me, and it was amazing.
So I am not wired like you at all, because I would not lay on that floor, one. And two, if something grabbed my foot, I would not cry tears of joy. I'd be like, all right, well, this was great. I've seen what I came to see. Let's leave.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a weird feeling because at first it scared the crap out of me. And then I immediately, as soon as I was like, oh, that was weird, I immediately was like, that's amazing. And I'm going to talk about this for the rest of my life.
That's awesome.
The most I have felt. Unfortunately, nothing more than that. But
I would have been on that floor in a second if they'd said that. I would have absolutely been right there.
Yes.
I'd have been standing there going, yeah, you do that. You tell me how that goes. I'll take notes. I'll write it down.
I live in Asheville, and this was in Kentucky. Like, we drove a long way. This is what I came for.
Sure.
Yes.
Those old tuberculosis hospitals have a really interesting history because they're all over the country, and they all sort of administered the same treatments early on. And then once tuberculosis wasn't so much of a thing, they all got converted into, asylums, basically.
Yep.
And a lot of different types of people wound up in those facilities, some of which had no business being in those facilities. And they're now treated through either in-home care, or therapies have come along for the developmentally disabled and intellectually disabled, where they can live totally normal lives in group home situations and stuff like that, which is great, which is fantastic. And I agree with that treatment for people. But these giant facilities are unfortunately getting torn down, or like through arson, they're getting burnt down. And like, I feel like we're living in a very interesting period where we are close enough to when they were built to know the history behind them, but still enjoy them as, curiosities in the paranormal world. But
a lot of the big ones, like that one, and like there's another one, I can't remember the name of it. A lot of the big ones, they have converted into paranormal investigating locations or just tours during the daytime.
Right.
And thank God for those people. Take all my money.
I just want to see these facilities preserved because, like you mentioned, the architecture on some of them is actually beautiful.
It is.
Some of them are really nice. So when I mentioned earlier, I think before we were recording, how I don't consider myself a paranormal investigator, but I used to run around abandoned buildings for kicks and look for old artifacts and stuff. A lot of time in those types of facilities.
Yes.
Yeah, this is purely my personal belief. There's absolutely zero backing for this, and this is an entirely subjective opinion because it is so important to me that I do not try to assert that I know the real truth. But I am a big believer in what I've heard called the stone tape theory or resonances. And so I find those places fascinating because I really do feel like there is something, I don't know, psychic, emotional, whatever, spiritual. I have no idea. That has been imprinted on those places. And,
absolutely.
And the fact that people go there and still have experiences like that. I'm not claiming that that's evidence for my pet theory, but it is validating to have confirmed the sorts of experiences that I think a lot of people have had, but they don't want to talk about. And so I think there's a lot of value in things like, you said at the beginning, you have the professional tools, but you don't feel like, you're yourself a professional, but you're doing people a service by going and investigating these things and then talking about what you experienced in a way that's open and doesn't shame the people who've had these experiences and are afraid to talk about them.
Right. That's true. And going back to the whole demon thing, because I don't mess with that. We've been to locations where they'll straight up say, oh, in this kitchen over here, people get their hair pulled or they get yanked back and there's supposedly a demon in there. I won't go in there because I don't know. My soul is not worth the risk. So I am a huge believer, and I'll preach all day long on the stone tape theory or someone having energy when you die. I believe your soul either goes to heaven or hell because I was raised a good Southern Christian girl, but your energy that you leave behind, there's just science. It has to go somewhere. And people that do the same things every day or they live in the same place their whole lives, their energy is going to go into that area. And especially with the stone tape theory, if it's water, like a river or these big giant buildings made out of rock, you're going to get the repetitive energy that was there a long time ago, just on replay essentially, and you're going to get that information you're looking for.
People are going to be haunted by the most boring ghost ever in my house.
Right?
Because I've been working
about that all the time.
I've been working from home for 7 months now.
Yeah.
I have probably worn a line in the floor for the two places I go in my house. Man, I'm going to be a really boring ghost on that theory. All his energy is just sitting in this chair.
Like the Devil's Tramping Ground. I listened to that episode the other day. Just a circle, just where he was just walking around.
Yeah. Oh man.
It'll be the Charlie's Tramping Ground.
It'll be Charlie's Tramping Ground. Very dull place. Do you get a sinister feeling? No, not particularly.
No, but every time I put something there, he moves it out.
I hear some 4-letter words very faintly, and then whatever I put in that spot flies across the room.
Yeah, I don't know what I'll haunt one day, whatever my energy is going to go to, but it's not going to be anything exciting, I'm sure.
Well, I love that story. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely close to my heart, and I hope I experience more and I can come back and tell you something even more exciting.
Yeah. So we will include in the show notes links to the stuff that you talked about at the beginning. People can get a hold of you. They can check out your podcast, especially. So this will air in November.
Okay.
But all your spooky episodes will already have been posted then. So people can go back and get some stories, and they'll all be stacked up and ready to go. And that'll be really great.
Yeah, we just did Madame LaLaurie in the LaLaurie Mansion. And then the final week, we're doing the Salem Witch Trials in Haunted Salem.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm excited.
That's going to be amazing.
If you enjoy that type of stuff, we have an episode coming up called The Cora Tree about a legend out of Hatteras and a witch trial. To call it a witch trial is generous. It was, anyway, it's an interesting episode.
I'll be on the lookout for it. I subscribe to you guys, so I'll be listening.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. This was super fun. If you ever want me in the future, or any of the other group members, they were traveling, so that's why it's just me. But If you guys need us in the future, let us know.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amber.
And we're the hosts of True Crime Buzz.
We believe there's nothing better than a good glass of wine.
Or whiskey.
And true crime.
So buckle up and get ready, y'all.
Because each week we like to pour a glass
and discuss true stories of crimes committed by people who probably should have been let's be honest.
That's right. Murders, missing persons, cults, we cover it all.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, with new episodes every Tuesday.
So grab a drink and join us. Cheers!
Thanks for joining us in an Arcane Carolinas Case Files. I am Michael G. Williams.
I'm Charlie Newshaw.
And our guest is Tony. Tony, introduce yourself to us.
I'm Tony King with Southeastern Paranormal.
It is such a pleasure to have you. I really enjoyed the story that you told us via email. And I think that I speak for both of us when I say that our immediate reaction was, oh, we've got to talk to this person. It was such a great story and really enjoyed getting to hear that. So tell us a little about the organization that you're with.
I have a long history, and so does my partner. We actually keep it simple. There's only two of us. The least amount of people that is involved in investigation is much easier to go through the evidence afterwards. But we each have 25 to 30 years experience, and we have, well, I should say, separate experiences. But Tim and I get along very well when it comes to investigating, and the type of evidence you get depends on the energy working also amongst the investigators. So I don't like to include a lot of people, especially strange people, because it definitely has an effect. But Tim and I seem to work very well together. He's Mr. IT, and I just take pictures and go through evidence. But I've had a life period of paranormal long before I was ever a ghost hunter or an investigator.
So how did you get started? That's hearing that you have 25 or 30 years of experience is exceptional. That I am so privileged to get to talk to you again. Thank you for being here. How did you get started?
Thank you. Well, as a kid, it was something that I had several experiences, and it was really very organic. I grew up in church, but we weren't an exceptionally religious family. So when I started having these experiences, I didn't think anything of them. I'd never talked about ghosts with anyone. I had no idea that what was happening wasn't natural. So I think I had a really good start in that area. And it wasn't until I was about 21 that I started learning about ghost hunters. Till then, it just never occurred to me. I always had natural experiences happening around me, and I never thought of actually going out and looking for places or spirits. But at the age of 21, I think it was the house ghost that I was living with at the time that really got me interested. There was so much, I don't want to say communication because I don't have a gift as far as I can't hear voices. I can't see ghosts, but I have a sense. And there was some form of communication, and that's what drove my interest to dive deeper into the paranormal. But that's what it took for me to realize the experiences that I was having when I was younger was actually paranormal. Otherwise, I had no clue.
That's awesome. We talk a lot about contextualizing experiences that might not be able to be easily explained in a couple of our episodes. And I think that what you just described is spot on to something that Michael and I have touched on. And I think in the Devil's Tramping Ground episode where, sometimes people can sense something and, it doesn't have to be this big showy experience for it to be, something real.
Yeah. In fact, I
usually it's not. It's usually
right. As much as I love Ghostbusters, it's a comedy movie with lots of special effects. It's it's not the way things actually
yes, it is.
Occur.
I think that
my husband likes to call me a ghost.
I think that the less intense experiences often are the more impactful ones to hear about because they're more personal.
Would you be open to sharing a story with us? And you can change names and locations to suit people's privacy, but we'd love to hear a story from you.
Yeah. If there's like a particularly favorite one that you like to share, go for it.
Yes. The one I'm going to share is definitely my favorite, mainly because it turned out to be a hilarious night on top of it. But we were visiting my favorite cemetery. I had a cemetery at the time that I spent many a nights in, usually alone. But on this particular night, my best friend decided to grow a pair and go with me, which was a first. The cemetery dates back to the 1500s. It's not really large, but I had spent so much time there that the spirits in this particular cemetery would actually let me know where to take pictures. And almost always, not always, but almost always, wherever I thought I heard them, that's where they would be. On this particular night, it was October the 13th. It was a full moon in 2003. And we decided, I think it was probably midnight before we ever even made the trip over. I did not know at the time, but the local high school had a huge football game that night. And so there was quite a bit of traffic right there on the main road where we were. But we get there and we start taking photographs, and he's really nervous. So I'm trying to kind of keep my distance from him to kind of help him have his own organic experience. Mm-hmm. If we hadn't been there a half an hour, I probably hadn't taken 10 photos. When we hear an extremely loud truck, I would say he was missing a muffler, pull into the parking lot. So this is very close to a very large church. This is their cemetery. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to be caught for trespass. Well, needless to say, with the full moon, it makes it pretty easy to hide in trees and such. So we basically sat down under a tree and just leaned back against it. Well, it was 3 high school guys walking around inside the cemetery. And we could hear their conversation, and they were actually there because they heard someone else was coming to the cemetery since it was the 13th and a full moon, and they were going to find a hiding place to scare them. Well, I am livid at this point. And I'm thinking, well, maybe we can just give them a little bit. They'll lose interest and they'll leave and we can pick up where we left off. I'm pretty evil when it comes to scaring people. So I decided I was going to get something out of it. So I waited for them. They had just walked by us. I waited for them to get about 10 feet away, and I let out this blood-curdling scream. I didn't even know I had anything like that in me. I mean, I gave it all I had. These poor guys, this cemetery is surrounded by a cast iron fence with the points on top. They nearly disemboweled themselves to get away from me. Well, there was I thought that I would scream, scare them, and sit there and laugh. Well, there was no keeping that laugh in. So needless to say, before they could get over the fence, they figured out somebody else was playing a joke on them. Well,
that is amazing.
That's great.
You could tell they weren't nearly as happy about that as I was, but they left. I did introduce myself and apologize, and just told them plainly I couldn't resist. So they finally leave, and I'm thinking, well, okay, maybe we can salvage another hour or so here. And again, it was about a half an hour I had been taking photographs, and we hear this truck coming back down the road again. But instead of pulling into the parking lot, it stopped momentarily out front. I knew then something was up. So I grabbed my friend, and we literally jumped into a cedar tree. And we watched these cemetery guys climb over the fence in the front. I don't know if it was pipes, if it was 2x4s, if it was bats, but they had blunt objects in their hand as we watched them sneak back through the cemetery. So I just waited for them to get out of sight, and we run to my truck, and it was it. That was it. The story was over with. We left. Well, I'm mad all the way home because here was this prime night. I totally missed my opportunity because this is back in the film days. This was not when we had digital. Mm-hmm. Until I get home and get I think it was 3 days later when I picked up my film. But that's when I caught the picture that I sent you guys. I refer to her as my angel because you can see her pointing to the exit gate. That was the last photograph taken inside the cemetery. So this happened just as we were about to run out to get away. But it was like she showed up trying to warn me.
Look at that.
Wow. I'm looking at that picture now for the first time. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, look at that.
It's definitely one of my best.
And there was no smoke or fog or, whatever.
No. I am a smoker, but I do not smoke on investigation, especially when there's a full moon.
Sure.
But this photo here, you can see this, what I'm holding up. This was immediately after. So that was as she was dissipating.
This is cool.
That's what was lit. Photo 2.
This is cool. Thank you so much for sharing this. Do you share this on your webpage or anything? Or
yes,
is this?
It is posted to Southeastern Paranormal.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or see more, what is the address for the webpage?
It is southeasternparanormal.com.
And we'll include that in the show notes as well on this episode. Now, we were talking earlier, in addition to pranking people and making them laugh, or maybe not making them laugh, making you laugh.
Yes, definitely.
Somebody was laughing.
I could have been hurt that.
You've mentioned that your focus is you really do want to help people when they're experiencing things that they might not necessarily understand or that make them uncomfortable in this area. What geographical regions do you serve?
North and South Carolina.
So like
That's
anywhere in either state.
Yeah, literally anywhere we need to be, we can go.
I really like that story. I like it because
great.
it's got a prank. It's got an awesome surprise outcome. And I definitely remember dropping the little roll of film off and anxiously awaiting to see how your pictures turned out. That's something that I think people that have grown up with only digital.
They miss it.
Yeah, because it was kind of fun.
And it was definitely fun. But I also think that the old film cameras as well as recorders were a lot more susceptible to picking up activity than the digital that we use these days.
I was going to ask
Definitely more
about that
impressive.
because I've read people suggest that they think that the analog technologies did a better job. They were just more sensitive to variations.
Absolutely. And I really think it is because there is some distortion to a film. And arguably, that's what most investigators don't like. But when you consider how objects like a ghost box works and that the analog recorders would have just enough of a racket that I think it could be manipulated better than an actual radio wave that they pick up through digital now. But, I'm also old school all the way, so
Nothing wrong with that. But Michael and I are decidedly not paranormal investigators. We do not claim to be paranormal investigators. We just really enjoy the stories. So we like hearing about different types of techniques.
Yeah. I've had a couple of experiences, but I'm not an expert, and I don't have any sort of authority or understanding of what exactly I experienced. I just know that I experienced them and that those experiences definitely really happened.
Yeah.
And so I am so fascinated to hear from people who really do have a deep understanding of this stuff and have invested a huge amount of time and effort and energy into analyzing this stuff and learning about it.
And truly, that's why we started this series of talks. Because we want to hear these stories. We want to talk to people like you. That's a great story. And it also helps get you and your organization's name out for people that might legitimately be seeking help. So,
yeah, and I want to make sure that we highlight that you were saying beforehand, Tony, about your website offering that help email.
There's been so many people that I think experiencing the paranormal, especially if you've already an adult and you've never had an experience before, I think regardless of what's happening, it's going to be terrifying. And we have so many people now that we get letters from that, I'm living with a demon. And I've been doing this so long and I've had so many experiences of my own. I have yet to experience a demon. Never once have I come across anything that I've run across some angry ghosts, but not demons. And I think that's the most important thing I like to drive home is just teach these people how to tell the difference so that they aren't living in fear and having nightmares over nothing.
That's great.
Really appreciate it. This is great, Tony. Thank you so much. Because I know it's weird to get an email out of the blue from an internet stranger, and I appreciate you at least being willing to.
I'm a ghost hunter. It's not the first time.
That was kind of my thought. I was looking through. When was that? Back in August, I think?
Yeah, something like that. August.
Yeah.
What is time anymore?
Right.
But I was looking through the list, and I was like, the information's public. It won't be too weird, right? But anyway, really appreciate it.
You never know. You never know what somebody's going to say.
No, you don't. And sometimes, as we have found out, no, you don't. We kind of learned where our own boundaries are in the process of doing this.
Yeah, you really would be running a lot of risk if you tried to do a live podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Especially on this subject.
But thank you again.
For today's Arcane Carolinas Case Files and our very first Arcane Carolinas Case Files, introduce yourself.
Hey there, my name is Alex Matsuo.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I like that name too.
It's the one I have.
I will spend the rest of my life wishing that I'd written under another name. I always say my parents weren't very creative, and now I wish I were. So, Alex, tell us a little about yourself and your investigations and your history with the paranormal.
Yeah, so I started my paranormal life at a fairly young age, except it was stifled for about a good 10 years until I was old enough to drive. So I had my first experience when I was about 6, 7-ish. Sometimes I say 8 or 9 because honestly, it's such a blur now because it was about 30 years ago. So, but yeah, I had my first supernatural experience where I had an experience as a kid. It freaked me out, but it also made me incredibly interested and I wanted to know more. However, I also grew up in a conservative Christian household.
Oh, I know those feels.
Yes. To the point where I couldn't watch Goosebumps. I couldn't read the Goosebumps books. I couldn't watch Are You Afraid of the Dark on SNCC. 90s kids, hey.
I remember.
Shout out.
Do you remember the premiere? Like, it was the biggest deal. They made a big thing out of SNCC and it's coming. And we all gathered around the television that night. And yep.
Yes. I lived with my grandma too at the time, and she was a little more lenient. So I would go to her room to watch it. And so my mom wasn't really happy about that, but we were also living under my grandmother's house. So I got a little bit of exposure, but I wanted to know more, but I was also told it's the devil's work and there's no such thing as ghosts. There's only demons. No Dana, only Zool, that sort of thing. Anytime I can loop in a Ghostbusters reference, I have to do it.
You've made an instant friend in Charlie.
Yep.
Yay. So I had an interest in it, and it wasn't really until I could drive that I was actually going out and ghost hunting. Well, I call it recreational ghost hunting. Some people will call it thrill seeking because I was 16. I didn't really know any better. So I was going to the cemeteries because cemeteries plus dead people equals ghosts. That was my mindset back then. And also around that time, maybe it happened a year before, but Ghost Hunters, the TV show came out, which that came out at a time where I had my own TV in my room by then. So I was watching it there too. And I was like, holy cow, people are actually going out there and doing this. But then I had a really troubling experience when I was about 18 years old, to the point where it was a lot of Pentecostal prayer style happening in my house. And after my car accident, I had another troubling experience that lasted for almost a year, where we had to get the Greek Orthodox Church to intervene. So I put it to bed. I put it away for a little bit. And I say a little bit, basically throughout my college years. It wasn't until I got into grad school, and I was in grad school for theater because I'm that kid. And
you have an instant friend in Michael.
Yeah.
Yay, instant friends. I love it. All the assignments I was doing in grad school, well, not all of them, I would say about a good 80% of my assignments, especially when we were talking about Shakespeare or current events as plot devices in plays and whatnot, they all had some sort of spooky, paranormal, or witchy twist to it. And my mentor in grad school pointed that out. He's like, you write a lot about ghosts and witches and the occult. Have you noticed that? And I'm like, I guess I do. So it was one of those things that even though I had put it away, it was still very much a part of who I was. And finally, I decided in my last year of grad school, because I'm like, well, I'm pretty much done with school. I'm not going to keep going because I had thought about going to get a PhD, but money and time.
Yep.
And so I decided, well, after I graduate, I'm going to start a team or join a team or do something. I want to do something with it. And so I decided to shadow a few teams that were local to me. I just sent them emails saying, hey, I want to feel this out. I don't know if this is something I want to do, but here's a little bit about me. I promise I'm not a creeper. I just want to feel this out. And really, I just want to know if I like it.
It's important to mention that because with any hobby, people can try to exploit it. And I think it's important to mention that people should be safe about
exactly.
So just that's all. I mean, we email people out of the blue, and I think sometimes it's hard to be, you need to give off good vibes and not be like, hey, listen, I really do just want to send you a sticker.
It's very
That's
easy to
not
come
creepy.
across as that person running across the parking lot saying, hey,
Right. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, especially in groups
really
that go
easy.
out to sometimes remote locations and maybe places where cell phones don't work and stuff like that. So,
well, and it's a set of interests that have been marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that they're marginalizing interests. I think that they have been marginalized, but that's the sort of thing where you already have to feel a little vulnerable telling people that you're interested in the first place.
Exactly. So a lot of these teams were really cool with it. They said, yeah, come to one of our meetups so we can meet you and make sure, we can trust you and we'll move on from there. And I mean, back then, thank God for Meetup, because I went to these meetups and I got to meet them in person. And sometimes it turned into, yes, let's hang out more, or, okay, it was great to meet you. That's all.
Yep.
And from there, I had realized I'm also extremely busy because I was a theater person. I was doing theater. I was also playing roller derby, and I was in San Diego, so I was working back and forth from LA too. So
wow.
I realized I was really busy and I wasn't going to be able to fit in the time requirement for a team. So that's actually what made me decide to start my own team, because then I could be my own boss, in my unpaid volunteer position. But basically I could be my own boss and just work around my own schedule. And that's really why I did it. A few of the teams I worked with kind of looked at it as, oh, she just did this to get competition. And it was literally like, if you're willing to work around my schedule, I'll be happy to join. But then they look at my schedule and they're like, no. So from there, I started my team, the Association of Paranormal Study, and we started in 2011 in San Diego, California.
So you're fast approaching your 10-year anniversary as a team.
It's crazy to think about that. Yeah. And literally, I used Craigslist to find my members. If we're going to talk about questionable things, like in getting to know people and stuff.
It's hard, right?
It's really hard. And this is 2011. So Craigslist was a thing, but it wasn't very well moderated. So I met some pretty interesting people, and I would have the interviews in this cafe in San Diego. It was a gothic vampire themed cafe called Lestat's.
Nice.
Yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful coffee house. And that's actually where we ended up having our team meetings too. And I actually ended up finding about 5 people who were amazing. And I'm actually still friends with them all. Even if they're not on the team anymore, we're still really good friends. Yeah, we just hit the ground running and we started doing residential cases because from my own experience of having, hauntings growing up, I didn't have anyone to turn to, neither did my mom. So that was really our bread and butter. And then we got a chance to do some public investigations too. We got access to this theater in San Diego called the 10th Avenue Theater, or the 10th Avenue Arts Center. And I actually gotten to know that theater from my theater life. And I had heard about the hauntings, and I actually experienced quite a few hauntings there. And I asked the owner, I said, hey, could my team investigate here? And he basically hands me the keys and he's like, yeah, go for it.
Wow.
So I had unlimited access to a haunted theater for 2 years, and that actually is what inspired the haunting of the 10th Avenue Theater.
I always find it interesting when businesses are so like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. I think back to in college, I am not a paranormal investigator. I just liked to run around in places that, were spooky or scary, thrill seeking, right? So I remember I took a folder that had the emblem of the university on it. And I just shoved a bunch of papers in there and grabbed 2 buddies and was like, come on, we're talking our way into the upper level of this bar where there's supposed to be a ghost. We walked in and was like, hello, this is a report for college and I'm investigating blah, blah, blah. Will you let me up there? And the bartender's like, yeah, sure, that's fine, whatever. I didn't know them. I wasn't even a patron of that place. I might not have even been 21 at that time. They're like, yeah, whatever, weirdo, just here. And they just unlocked it. They're like, take all your pictures, we'll tell you stories, now get out. But yeah, it is funny it's a little uncomfortable at first, but once you sort of break the ice, how people are willing to explore this type of material.
Yep. And it's building a level of trust because as Michael said, I mean, you do feel a bit vulnerable just coming out with, yeah, I believe in ghosts. I mean, something simple as that. And I had already created a relationship with that space because of my theater life. It had nothing to do with the paranormal. And I'm really grateful for that I had that connection. And a lot of the locations that I have really close connections with, most of those relationships didn't even start from the paranormal. It started from like theater, or it started from work, or it started from a friend. And I do appreciate that, because I think that adds a little bit of credibility to, because they're like, oh, well, she's not just a thrill seeker coming in, or she's not just somebody who's going to come in and exploit us, which unfortunately is a thing in the paranormal. Very much so. So I'm really grateful that I can make those connections, and it's a great life. I mean, I love the paranormal community for the most part. Every community has its toxicity, as I say. I love the paranormal community, and I also love the people that keep coming in.
Michael and I, in real life, work together, and we actually did not talk about ghosts, aliens, cryptids, any X-Files-esque topics for the first year or so that we worked together.
Yeah, easily.
And then I might have started with television, talking about Anyway, here we are. So yes, sometimes those connections are right next to you at work.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But it's the sort of thing where, I mean, we've experienced this already, just making this podcast. Of the second you tell people that you're into this, or that you're willing to entertain it as a possibility, people immediately start spitting out their stories, because a lot of people have these experiences and they are desperate for an outlet to share that. And they don't know where it's safe to say, I saw a ghost, I saw a UFO, whatever the experiences are that they've had. And, they don't know where it's okay to say that out loud without being ridiculed for sharing something that has happened to them.
Exactly. I mean, I experienced that in my real big kid job. It was with a coworker that's not there anymore, but her first day, we all had gone out for a meal, and one of my coworkers had mentioned, because she was trying to get to know us and everything, one of my coworkers mentioned, oh yeah, Alex is into like all the weird stuff. And I was asked to elaborate, and I just kept it super high level. I said, oh, ghosts and hauntings, and that's really interesting to me. And immediately this poor girl looks at me like I was a devil worshiper. Right. And so things were a little weird after that. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can't really talk about this all the time. But my coworkers who were cool with it, they're always like, oh yeah, tell us a story. They want to hear like, oh, did you go on a ghost hunt this weekend? Tell us about it. So I almost feel like eventually I'm going to become like part of the hiring process, like the test. Like, here's Alex. How do you feel about Alex? She goes and talks to ghosts. That's the personality test.
Yeah, sure. Right. So you mentioned San Diego. You're on the East Coast now, right?
Yes, I'm in Raleigh.
And where in the Carolinas do you currently kind of do your investigations?
We're focusing a lot on like the Central Carolinas area. So we're talking like Winston-Salem, Hamptonville, Hickory. There's a lot of spooky stuff over there. We've also been more east, so like Wilmington, the Battleship, North Carolina. Also, there's Western North Carolina that has a lot of stuff, especially Asheville has a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
It does.
Holy cow, Asheville has a lot of stuff. It seems like I have this theory, the closer you get to Tennessee, the weirder things get, because Tennessee is a pretty weird state too.
I would like to have it on the record that I did not say that. Nor had I done any preparation to have that said on this podcast.
Having grown up in the mountains, I thoroughly agree.
I say the same thing about Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is like, oh, hell yeah. They just get really excited anytime I talked about Gettysburg, because I'm like, Gettysburg, Pittsburgh State College, there's some weird stuff in Pennsylvania too. And I say that, I'm like, as soon as I cross the border into Pennsylvania, it hits me. Like, I'm like, whoa, what's going on?
Will confirm. I'll back you up on that. Have you ever been to, what was it, Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania? And it's in Philly.
I haven't, but oh my gosh,
it's fun.
It's a legend in the paranormal community. I mean,
it's worth the price of admission. You'll have a good time. It's fun. And you won't get in trouble for being in there.
True. True.
Where can people find you online if they want to send you information about cases or whatever?
Yeah. So you can go to my website. Both of these URLs go to the same place. You can go to alexmatsuo.com or thespookystuff.com, whichever is easier to remember. And I'm also on YouTube. I'm also on TikTok, Instagram. So you can basically find me almost anywhere. I'm on Facebook too, but Facebook is getting a little too negative for my taste lately. So I've been more focusing on just posting to my page and then moving on to like Instagram and TikTok, because those are more positive for me right now. But I'm easy to find.
And I'll link to all of that in the show notes also. So are you like actively accepting requests from people who want somebody to come do an investigation?
Yeah, we are. We just recently started back into investigating. We are really toning down the number of team members that go on a case now because of COVID, because we want to make sure not only are you safe, but also we are safe.
Mhm.
So we wear masks and we do the whole bit, sanitize. So we are accepting them as long as you're okay with, you're probably only going to get 2 team members right now. People think their houses are bigger than they are until there's 6 people in it.
Also,
oh.
the Ghostbusters divided and conquered.
Exactly. And it may turn into a thing where, okay, well, these 2 are going to go in this week. Next week, I'm going to send these 2 over if it's not an urgent case. Although we have been getting a lot of demonic case requests lately, and I'm like, I don't do that life. We don't do exorcisms. We don't do deliverances. So that's definitely something that's out of our wheelhouse, but we'll try to find you somebody that will take it on. Mostly because half of my team is in a vulnerable place right now, just between health issues or family matters. And when you take on a demonic case, you have to be ready to kind of go into spiritual warfare. And I had major surgery 2 months ago. I am not in a place to take on a demonic case right now.
I think given the state of the world in general at the moment, I don't think I could handle that.
No, and it's trying. It's trying.
I guess I'll go on record since we're recording. This is my glowing, bright 1,000-watt line that I will not cross on this show that I've told Michael, where I have no interest in those types of discussions. Because we have had people, tell us like, oh, I'd love to tell you about this and that. And I'm like, I don't think that's a great idea, because what if people start poking at stuff? And I don't want to ever be the person that encouraged someone to pursue that.
Yeah,
it's starring in the cold open to a horror movie.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's definitely a life. I admire demonologists for what they do. It's definitely not something that I'm cut out for, because I did help a demonologist when I first moved out to North Carolina, because he was in DC and he's like, hey, I like your work. Would you like to work together? And I just moved out here. I was like, oh yeah, I'd be definitely interested in this. It takes a toll on you. It takes a toll on you mentally, physically. It's a lot of back and forth with the client, because you have to rule out mental illness and other physical ailments. It's exhausting. And most of the time the client's not receptive. And that's just me basing off of my own experience. Listeners, you may have had a different experience, but a lot of clients are not receptive to that. And it's also a liability. I'm not willing to put myself in that position of liability. I mean, just look at the Annalise Michael case. That's all I'll say.
Do you have a favorite ghost hunting experience in the Carolinas that you like to tell people?
Ooh, yes. So there is a place in Hamptonville, North Carolina. It's not too far from Statesville at all. And it's this little hospital clinic in a very rural part of North Carolina. It's opened in the early 1930s by a doctor named Dr. Trevette. And he had actually moved back down from living up north because his parents were aging and whatnot. So he opened a clinic. And this was the place where women had their babies, tonsils were taken out, or if someone got into an accident on the road, they were taken to that clinic. Because there was a hospital not too far away, but back in the 1930s, I mean, trips that took like 30 minutes took like 4 hours. So yeah, a lot of stuff there. And it became a supper club in the basement. And then it also became a detox clinic after the doctor's wife sold the clinic to someone else. And then it became a nursing home twice. And then it became a permanent residence as a just people moving in and remodeling it. And then it just became like abandoned until some of the family members of Dr. Trevette ended up buying the property. So rumored to be about 70 ghosts there. At first, I didn't really believe that, but then I had talked to a woman who had lived at the clinic as a house. Her parents bought it in the 60s, remodeled it. I believe they were the only people to live in the house. And she told me, I guess, as they were remodeling and going through everything, they had found all of these jars of body parts. And before anyone thinks, oh, that's evil and sinister, I mean, we're thinking 1930s. Yeah. Dr. Trevette stored all those body parts to study. So, and I asked her, I said, okay, well, cool. What did you do with the jars? And she said, oh, we just dug a big hole and dumped them all in the hole and covered it up. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it explains how active it is.
That's like, it doesn't make great radio, but I just sat there with my mouth open after you said that because, oh my God.
Yeah.
What?
Just dug a hole, dumped them all in the hole and covered it up. And she told me exactly where it was. And yeah, so I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. That's cool. So we got a lot of different ghosts there. A lot of the hauntings there don't make sense. Like, they may have been patients, but no one really died at the clinic, when it was a hospital. Same thing with the nursing home. When the patients there were getting ready to kick the bucket, they were taken to the hospital. So, I mean, there was a few deaths there, but not enough to be like, oh my gosh, this is why it's so active. But all of the weird hauntings, like, there's a little girl in the basement who is there, and her name is Majesty. That's how you know you're in the South, by the way. Her name's Majesty, and she loves to play with this little ball. We don't really know what her story is, really. We have a theory that maybe she was a patient in the nursing home and her mind had gone back to like 5 or 6 years old. And so that's how she manifests in the afterlife. That's the only thing we could really find to explain that, but she's very active there. The doctor's wife also makes an appearance, and this is where my favorite story comes up. We were trying to basically communicate with anyone else in the house. We were towards the end of our investigation, and I knew that the doctor's wife loved opera. So I'm like, you know what? Let's play some La Boheme. Musetta's Waltz, because that was really the only thing I could think of because of Rent. So,
fair enough.
But, it was contextual. I'm like, it's opera. I mean, she wouldn't have known about Jonathan Larson or Rent. So I got out my phone. I pulled up Spotify. I found Musetta's Waltz right away. I put my phone down away from the equipment because I didn't want the equipment to go off because of the phone. And so we just started playing the music. First run, nothing happened. I put it on repeat because here's the thing about ghost hunting, for anyone that doesn't know, it takes a long time to sometimes find a response or get a response to anything. It's a lot of sitting in the dark doing nothing and asking questions to the air.
Which is why you got to make sure that you're not going out there with creeps.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that the TV shows don't get across is that, and probably because they're not doing it, it requires like so much patience. You have to think of a TV show Private Eye, like sitting there doing a stakeout for 7 hours or whatever.
Yep. They don't show like the whole 7 hours. They show we're on a stakeout. Oh, there they are.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very much a hurry up and wait. So we'd sat there listening to Musetta's Waltz a little bit. And finally, I start to notice one of the K2 meters starts going off. And then another K2 meter, which was in another area, starts going off. So all of our equipment starts going off at the same time, and it matches the pulse of the music, which is nuts. I mean, because we had equipment on the other side of the room. So I'm like, well, I don't think my little phone's this powerful to make everything go off like that, especially with how far it was from the equipment. And it actually was a very spiritual, emotional experience. Like, I don't think anyone else had really gone in there and played opera for his wife. So that was really one of my favorite experiences. And then we wanted to debunk it. I'm like, okay, let's see what else can we play, because I want to experiment. So I chose something completely different. I played Dreams by Van Halen just to see, because at this point we were done because we were ready to go home. And so I just played Van Halen because I'm like, okay, if anything's going to show like different pulses, it's going to be that song, because the intro and everything, and nothing. It didn't go off. None of the equipment went off. So Musetta's Waltz made it all go off, though.
I am covered in goose flesh. That is an amazing story. Thank you so much.
I would like to revisit one part of the story, the jar hole. Jar hole, that's a word. So the jar hole is on the property.
Yes, it is.
I broke Michael.
You did.
Like, could you look out the back window and like just see the jar hole where it was?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
So it's like close.
Oh, it's right outside the front door. Like, you walk 10 steps and the jar hole's right there.
I'm just thinking of the movie Trick or Treat, the anthology movie where the guy just has that hole in his backyard full of bodies.
Yep.
There's growth over it now. I mean, there's grass and flowers and everything.
Sure. Yeah. No doubt. I got you. I'm also imagining like they have to pull a permit to get a deck built or something, and like they have to have the county come out to like inspect. Like, oh, there's the septic lines, and there's this and there's that. What's here? Like, oh, that's our jar hole.
That's the jar hole.
That's the jar hole.
Don't worry about it. It's all above board. We're
Oh, don't worry. Those people are all dead.
I will always look at it as the jar hole now. Thanks.
Yeah. In my writing life, one of the things I've worked on is the 20th anniversary edition of Wraith the Oblivion for White Wolf, the tabletop role-playing game. And in that game, there is the concept of fetters and like physical objects in the living world that spirits are tied to. And in game mechanics, you go wreck one of those and you've weakened the ghost or whatever. But this really makes me think of something like that, where no wonder there might be inexplicable hauntings. If there are body parts from people who died unsettled, then that might be the only thing in this world that they're able to tie to, and that's where they're going to be.
Yep.
I
would kind of rather
jars.
be in the house at midnight than in the front yard.
So this was a clinic. This wasn't like a proper hospital, right?
No, it was just like a small town clinic. Yeah.
So and you said there's 70 ghosts in this house.
Approximately, yeah. The legend, lore, myth. I mean, that was created in like the past 20 years.
Yeah, sure.
And
again,
70
I'm
ghosts.
just spitballing. So you're a doctor, and like you said, you need reference material, right? You're obviously not dissecting and preserving these specimens in your clinic. They're coming from somewhere else. Maybe that's why there's inexplicable spirits. I don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of them we just can't explain. Like there was one, so they also get sent a lot of like haunted objects, and there's a wardrobe that they got sent that has a little girl attached to it named Emily.
No.
And where they keep it, Emily's got an interesting personality, but there's also a very dark male spirit, I think, that's also attached to the wardrobe. No one's really said, oh, he's attached to the wardrobe, but I'm like, well, there's something really weird here, and it's not a guy, or it's not a girl. It's not a little girl. It's not even sassy little girl energy or little girl energy of like, I don't want to talk to you. It's a lot of anger and whatnot, and I always know when he's around because I tend to get completely blocked off from like feeling anything. And that's how I know my mom's around, which means, oh, there's something dangerous nearby. So, and I will have to tell my mom sometimes to back off. It's like, hey, I'm safe. You can step away. It's okay. But yeah, there's something really negative associated with that wardrobe, and it opens and closes by itself. We'll do pictures and cameras, baseline stuff. Even when the weather changes and the wood's expanding and shrinking, we'll test it out. We'll usually close the wardrobe right away, and we'll test it to see, like, we'll shake it like, okay, how easy is it for it to open right now? Mm-hmm. Usually when it's closed, like there's no knob in the wardrobe, so I have to stick my finger in the hole to open up the wardrobe. It's not just gonna open by itself.
Who would send this to people
who don't want that guy in their house anymore?
Right.
We got this big grump, and we don't want to deal with him. He's potentially a pretty bad thing, so you can have it.
Get rid of the whole wardrobe.
Right.
Throw it all out.
Right.
Oh my God.
You can go haunt the municipal dump. How about that?
Yeah.
You like the wardrobe so much? I got a great place for it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
Yeah. This is awesome. This is great. I hope you enjoyed talking to us.
Yeah, I did. This was fun.
I don't know why I asked that like such a...
You asked that as like I was going to be like, no.
No, this was terrible. Delete it. You can't use it. Well, if somebody had, one of the things that we want to do to make people feel welcome while we talk to them is like if they say after the fact, like, you know what, actually, I don't want to share that. We do want to keep that open. We do want to be respectful of
absolutely
in that sense.
Everything I shared is public facing, so we're good. None of it's internal.
Cool.
Good deal.
Cool. Well, keep up the awesome work. I really do enjoy the stuff that you post. You did a thing about orbs the other day that it like showed up in our feed.
The dance video.
And I laughed because is that a God? I sound
It's a TikTok.
Okay, so
is that one of those click clock things?
Oh, it looked like, I'm like, oh, this is like a TikTok thing, but I'm not on TikTok. So is it still a TikTok? Anyway, point is, it made me laugh and I liked it. So
awesome. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I always think a lot of us in the paranormal community, we take ourselves way too seriously. And I'm like, guys, we go look for ghosts. Come on. And we can't even prove the existence of ghosts. So I'm totally okay with poking fun of myself. And I think that's why I've attracted a lot of people to my area, to my world, because yes, there's a time and a place for it to be spooky. Let's tell this terrifying story. But then there's a other part of, you know what? And that's really what my YouTube channel is about, is because there's another plus size paranormal YouTuber who's amazing. I love her stuff, but she's very serious. I'm not that at all. Mm-hmm. And so when I do my stuff, like when I was talking about my TikTok, I'm talking about TikTok conspiracy that's going around right now. And I bring up how there's a direction on the effect saying, oh, draw with your finger. And I'm sitting here with my phone and I went, nothing's happening. Oh! So I bring that up in the video because I need to be able to laugh at myself, and also beating my viewers to that too, beating them to the punchline of, oh yeah, okay, it's okay to laugh. We take ourselves way too seriously in the paranormal. Like, a lot of people think they have the answer. And it drives me nuts. Yeah. It drives me nuts. Because we don't have the answer. And experience can be credibility, but also at the same time, it's, well, how do you know you're talking to a ghost? What if it's a fairy? Because people believe in fairies. I'm kind of about it. Not going to dog it. Or is it a demon? You know, it's like, how do you know you're talking to a ghost? We have not caught a ghost. We have not put a ghost in the box. We don't have proton packs in real life. We can't study a ghost and say what they're made of. So the whole idea of like, I have the answer, it drives me nuts. I can tell you my theories. I can tell you my theories of what I believe in based on my experience, but I am not ever going to say this is a fact.
That's kind of what we try to do as well. We close out our episodes, we try to, with a, what might it be? And then this is what I think it could potentially be based on this thing that happened one time. And eventually, I promise, Michael and I will get around to telling our own stories. But today is not that day.
I think we're doing that next week, aren't we?
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh,
next week is when I'm doing the UFOs episode.
Yes.
Ooh.
That'll be, yes. I'm really looking forward to that one.
I like to think of us as being open to the possibilities without being tied to dogma.
Yeah, without being tied to dogma. And especially when you're working with clients in residential cases, you have to be really careful with how you word things, because you could send someone into a psychotic break or inspire them to not take their medication anymore. Like that's the whole liability side of ghost hunting that no one really talks about. You have to be really careful with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
That's things are heavy.
I started to keep talking, and then I was like, no, I will talk about this until 4 a.m. Thank you so much. Again, this is so delightful. Really
thanks
appreciate
for having
your time.
me.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at www.michaelgwilliamsbooks.com, and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.